Chapter 1. The Night Humanity Left the Earth. There are certain moments in history that feel larger than history itself. Moments so enormous that they seem to divide human time into separate eras. Before and after. The night of July 20th, 1969 became one of those moments. For the first time in recorded history, human beings stood upon another world. Nearly 600 million people watched through flickering television screens as the grainy black and white image appeared. A ladder descending from a strange metallic craft. A solitary figure moving slowly in reduced gravity. And then the words that would become permanently embedded in human memory. One small step for man. Whether heard clearly or imperfectly through radio static, the meaning was unmistakable. Humanity had left Earth, or so the world believed. The Apollo missions transformed the 20th century almost instantly. They represented technology, ambition, courage, and national rivalry concentrated into a single event. The United States and the Soviet Union had entered a struggle unlike any competition in human history. Not merely a race for territory. Not simply military dominance, but a race toward the heavens themselves. And for a brief moment, it seemed as though humanity had stepped directly into the future. Yet alongside another force quietly emerged. Doubt. Not immediately. Not publicly. But gradually. Whispers at first. Questions asked quietly in living rooms, universities, bars, and late-night radio broadcasts. Could it really have happened exactly as presented? Did human beings truly travel nearly 400,000 kilometers through space using 1960s technology? Could astronauts survive radiation, vacuum, isolation, and mechanical failure to land safely upon the moon and return alive? Or had something about the story been hidden, perhaps simplified? Perhaps manipulated, perhaps entirely fabricated. Over the decades, the moon landing became something unusual in modern history. Not merely an achievement, but a battleground between belief and suspicion, between institutional authority and public distrust, between documented evidence and psychological uncertainty. The Apollo missions did not simply place humans on the moon. They also exposed something deeper about modern civilization itself, the fragile relationship between truth and perception. To understand why these doubts emerged, it is important to remember the atmosphere of the era. The 1960s were filled with contradiction. Technological optimism existed beside political fear. Scientific advancement unfolded alongside propaganda and espionage. The Cold War shaped nearly every major decision made by global superpowers. And the space race was never purely scientific. It was symbolic. Whoever controlled space appeared to control the future. After the Soviet Union launched Sputnik 1, the psychological shock within the United States was enormous. The idea that another nation had reached space first created panic at political and military levels. Soon afterward came more milestones. The first animal in orbit. The first human in space. Yuri Gagarin became an international symbol almost overnight. To many observers, the Soviet Union appeared technologically unstoppable. America needed an answer. Not eventually. Immediately. And so the moon became the ultimate objective. Not because the moon itself held immediate practical value, but because reaching it first would demonstrate technological supremacy before the entire planet. In 1961, John F. Kennedy announced that the United States would send a man to the moon before the decade ended. At the time, the goal seemed almost impossible. Human spaceflight itself was still in its infancy. Computers were primitive by modern standards. Rocket failures remained common. And yet within only 8 years, NASA claimed it had achieved the greatest technological accomplishment in human history. For millions, the achievement felt miraculous. For others, it felt suspiciously fast. This tension would later become fertile ground for conspiracy theories, especially as public trust in governments began collapsing during the 1970s. The Vietnam War, political scandals, secret intelligence programs, manipulated information. As confidence in official institutions weakened, skepticism surrounding Apollo quietly expanded. And perhaps that skepticism was inevitable, because the moon landing exists at the intersection of two powerful human emotions: wonder and distrust. On one hand, Apollo represents humanity at its most extraordinary. Engineers solving impossible problems, astronauts risking death to explore another world, a civilization reaching beyond its own planet for the first time. But on the other hand, the event emerged from a geopolitical system built heavily upon secrecy, propaganda, and strategic image-making. The same governments capable of inspiring humanity were also capable of deception. And once that realization entered public consciousness, every detail surrounding Apollo began attracting scrutiny. Photographs, shadows, flags moving strangely in airless environments, radiation belts, missing telemetry data, unexplained technical anomalies. For some, these details became evidence of fabrication. For others, they reflected misunderstandings amplified by modern distrust and internet speculation. What makes the Apollo story so fascinating is not simply the question of whether humans reached the moon. It is the deeper psychological question beneath it. Can modern society still recognize truth in an age shaped by media, politics, and spectacle? The moon landing was among the first global events experienced simultaneously through television, a mediated reality. Most people did not witness the event directly. They experienced it through screens, through narration, through institutional storytelling. And perhaps this changed something fundamental in human consciousness. For the first time, an event of immense historical importance also felt strangely cinematic, distant, untouchable, almost unreal. The blackness of space, the unnatural silence, the grainy images, the slow-motion movement of astronauts across a lifeless landscape. Everything about Apollo seemed suspended somewhere between documentary and dream. And dreams invite doubt. Even today, more than half a century later, the moon landing continues generating fascination unlike almost any other event in modern history. Because Apollo represents more than technology. It represents the fragile border between myth and reality in the modern world. Some see it as humanity's greatest achievement. Others see it as history's greatest illusion. And perhaps the true story is more complicated than either extreme. Not necessarily a complete fabrication. Not necessarily a perfect narrative. But a deeply human story shaped by ambition, fear, politics, perception, and the overwhelming desire to believe that humanity could leave Earth behind. Tonight, we begin that journey. Not to declare certainty, not to prove conspiracy, but to explore the strange territory where history, technology, psychology, and myth begin to overlap. The story of Apollo, the story of the moon, and the enduring question that still echoes through modern culture more than 50 years later. What truly happened on the night humanity claimed to leave the Earth? Chapter 2. The Race Toward the Moon. To understand Apollo, it is necessary to understand fear. Not ordinary fear, not personal fear, but geopolitical fear on a planetary scale. The kind of fear that shapes governments, economies, military systems, and entire generations. By the late 1950s, the Cold War had transformed the world into two competing realities. On one side stood the United States and its allies. On the other, the Soviet Union. Both possessed nuclear weapons. Both believed the survival of their political systems depended upon defeating the other. And both understood something terrifying. The nation that controlled space might eventually control Earth itself. When the Soviet Union launched Sputnik 1 into orbit, the psychological impact on the United States was immediate and profound. The satellite itself was small, simple by modern standards, but its meaning was enormous. If the Soviets could place an object above Earth, they could potentially place weapons there as well. American newspapers described the launch almost like a national trauma. Schools began emphasizing science and mathematics more aggressively. Military planners worried about technological inferiority. Politicians feared international humiliation. And ordinary citizens looked upward with a new sense of anxiety. Then came another shock. In April 1961, Yuri Gagarin became the first human being to travel into space. The Soviet Union now appeared not only militarily dangerous, but technologically superior. For many Americans, the future itself suddenly seemed uncertain. Could the United States truly compete? Or had the Soviet system surpassed the West scientifically? It was within this atmosphere that John F. Kennedy made one of the most ambitious political declarations in modern history. The United States would send a man to the moon before the decade ended. At the time, this statement bordered on the unbelievable. Human spaceflight was still primitive. Astronauts could barely remain in orbit for extended periods. Rockets frequently exploded during testing. Computers occupied entire rooms while possessing less processing power than modern pocket calculators. And yet suddenly, the objective was no longer low Earth orbit. It was the moon, nearly 400,000 kilometers away. Kennedy understood something important. The moon was not merely a scientific target. It was symbolic. If America reached the moon first, the entire world would witness proof of American technological dominance. The mission became psychological warfare conducted through engineering. And once that process began, the scale of Apollo expanded rapidly. NASA received enormous funding. Factories, laboratories, and testing facilities emerged across the country. Hundreds of thousands of engineers, technicians, scientists, and contractors became involved in the effort. The Apollo program evolved into one of the largest technological mobilizations in human history. At its peak, the program consumed extraordinary resources. Entire industries were reorganized around space development. Rocket engines were tested relentlessly. Astronauts trained under brutal physical and psychological conditions. Every component had to function perfectly, because failure in space rarely allows correction. One malfunction, one leak, one computational error, and astronauts die. The technical challenges facing Apollo were almost overwhelming. A rocket powerful enough to escape Earth's gravity had to be designed from near scratch. Navigation systems capable of guiding astronauts through space needed to function with astonishing precision. Life support systems had to sustain humans in an environment fundamentally hostile to biological life. And unlike modern missions, nearly all of this had to be accomplished without advanced digital technology. The computers used during Apollo now appear primitive beyond imagination. Memory limitations measured in kilobytes. Processing speeds insignificant compared to modern devices. Yet somehow, according to official history, these systems guided astronauts to the moon and back successfully. For supporters of Apollo's authenticity, this achievement represents extraordinary human ingenuity. For skeptics, it represents one of the primary sources of doubt. How could such limited technology accomplish something so advanced? This question would become central to later conspiracy theories, especially as modern audiences, accustomed to sophisticated computers and automation, struggled to comprehend how 1960s engineering achieved lunar travel. But technological skepticism alone does not fully explain the growth of moon landing conspiracies. The deeper issue involves trust. During the Cold War, information itself became weaponized. Both superpowers carefully controlled public narratives. Successes were amplified, failures minimized or hidden. Propaganda surrounded nearly every major achievement. The Soviet Union concealed disasters routinely. The United States engaged in extensive psychological operations and media management. And because governments manipulated information in many other areas, some people later asked an uncomfortable question. If authorities could lie about wars, intelligence operations, and political scandals, could they also lie about the moon? This question gained momentum during the 1970s after major institutional scandals damaged public trust within the United States. The Vietnam War revealed significant discrepancies between official statements and battlefield realities. Then came Watergate scandal. Government deception was no longer theoretical. It had become undeniable. Public confidence eroded rapidly. And once trust collapses, even genuine achievements can begin appearing suspicious. Apollo entered this atmosphere at exactly the wrong moment. What had once symbolized national triumph gradually became re-examined through a lens of skepticism. Photographs were analyzed obsessively. Video footage slowed down frame by frame. Technical inconsistencies, real or perceived, spread through documentaries, books, and eventually the internet. Some critics focused on visual anomalies. Why did shadows appear unusual in certain images? Why did the flag seem to move? Why were stars absent from lunar photographs? Others focused on engineering questions. Could astronauts truly survive the Van Allen radiation belts? How did the lunar module operate so precisely? Why has returning humans to the moon proven so difficult decades later? Many of these questions have conventional scientific explanations. Lighting conditions, camera exposure settings, radiation exposure duration, engineering economics. But conspiracy theories rarely survive solely because of unanswered technical details. They survive because they connect to emotion. And emotionally, Apollo exists in a uniquely vulnerable position. The moon landing feels almost too extraordinary, too cinematic, too symbolic. The event arrived during a period when humanity desperately needed proof that technological progress could still inspire hope rather than fear. Nuclear weapons threatened civilization. Political tensions dominated daily life. And then suddenly, humanity walked on another world. The contrast felt almost mythological. A species capable of self-destruction, also capable of transcending Earth itself. Perhaps that emotional scale contributes to the continuing uncertainty surrounding Apollo. Because events this large no longer feel entirely human. They begin to resemble legend. And legends always attract doubt alongside belief. Even today, decades later, the space race remains one of the most psychologically fascinating periods in modern history. Not simply because of rockets or astronauts, but because it revealed how deeply technology, politics, media, and mythology had become intertwined. The moon was never only about the moon. It was about power, perception, fear, hope, and humanity's desire to prove that the future still belonged to us. Somewhere within that enormous pressure, Apollo emerged. A mission balanced between engineering and symbolism, between documented reality and collective imagination. And as the rockets prepared for launch, one question quietly lingered beneath the surface of global celebration. What if reaching the moon mattered so much that failure was never considered an acceptable option? Chapter 3: The Impossible Machine. There are moments in technological history when human achievement appears almost unreal. The construction of the pyramids, the first transatlantic voyages, the splitting of the atom, and Apollo. Even today, decades after the moon landings, the sheer technical complexity of the mission remains difficult to fully comprehend. Not because the science is hidden. Much of it is publicly documented, but because the scale of coordination required feels overwhelming. Thousands of components, millions of moving parts, hundreds of thousands of workers, all operating with precision so exact that a minor error could kill astronauts instantly. The moon is not simply far away. It exists within an environment fundamentally hostile to human life. No breathable air, no atmospheric protection, extreme temperature variations, radiation, micrometeorites, total isolation. Every second outside Earth's atmosphere carries danger. And yet, according to official history, NASA succeeded repeatedly. 6 successful lunar landings, 12 astronauts walking on the moon, human beings traveling nearly 400,000 kilometers through space and returning safely to Earth using technology developed in the 1960s. To supporters of Apollo, this represents perhaps the greatest engineering accomplishment in human history. To skeptics, it feels almost impossible. And it is precisely that feeling, impossibility, that lies at the heart of many moon landing doubts. Because Apollo forces modern audiences into a strange psychological contradiction. On one hand, we are told the missions were achieved with astonishingly primitive computers and limited digital systems. On the other hand, the accomplishment itself appears more advanced than many technologies developed decades later. This tension creates cognitive dissonance. How could a civilization capable of landing humans on the moon struggle for decades afterward to return there? Why did lunar missions stop so suddenly after seeming so successful? Why does modern technology sometimes appear less ambitious than the systems developed during Apollo? These questions do not automatically prove conspiracy, but they create emotional uncertainty. And uncertainty invites speculation. At the center of Apollo stood one of the most powerful machines ever constructed by human beings, the Saturn V rocket. Even now, it remains among the tallest, heaviest, and most powerful rockets ever successfully flown. Standing beside it, observers often described an almost overwhelming physical sensation. The machine seemed less like transportation and more like architecture. A moving skyscraper. A controlled explosion pointed toward the sky. When fully fueled, Saturn V contained unimaginable energy. The engines generated such force that nearby ground trembled during launch. Windows shattered miles away. The rocket consumed fuel at extraordinary rates while accelerating astronauts beyond Earth's atmosphere. And yet this enormous machine had to function with near-perfect reliability. There were no rescue systems once deep space travel began. No quick return. No possibility of external assistance. Apollo astronauts existed entirely within the machinery surrounding them. A sealed mechanical environment carrying fragile human bodies through vacuum and radiation. The risks were extreme. Even before Apollo reached the moon, tragedy had already struck. In 1967, during a launch rehearsal test, a fire inside the command module killed 3 astronauts. Apollo 1 fire exposed severe flaws in spacecraft design and safety procedures. The disaster shocked NASA deeply. For a moment, it seemed possible that the Moon program itself might collapse. But instead, development accelerated. Designs were revised, testing intensified, and public pressure to succeed remained enormous. This urgency would later become important for conspiracy theorists. Some argue that the political need for victory became so overwhelming that truth itself may have become secondary. Again, no direct evidence conclusively proves such claims. But emotionally, the pressure surrounding Apollo undeniably existed. The United States had invested immense national prestige into the Moon missions. Failure carried geopolitical consequences. Success promised global symbolic dominance. And history shows that governments under extreme pressure sometimes manipulate narratives to preserve authority. This reality fuels suspicion even today, especially among those who already distrust institutional power. Yet Apollo's engineering achievements remain difficult to dismiss entirely. The missions produced massive amounts of technical documentation. Independent observatories tracked spacecraft trajectories. Thousands of scientists and engineers participated openly in the program. Soviet monitoring systems observed Apollo flights carefully during the Cold War. If the missions had been completely fabricated, skeptics must explain not only NASA's role, but the silence or cooperation of countless individuals across multiple nations and industries. This is one reason the Apollo debate remains so polarizing. Both sides encounter problems. For believers, the technological achievement feels almost miraculous. For skeptics, the scale of the alleged deception feels nearly impossible to sustain. And somewhere between these positions lies a more complicated reality. Because history rarely functions in absolute simplicity. There is also another factor often overlooked in discussions about Apollo. Human beings are emotionally vulnerable to spectacle. Large-scale events affect perception differently from ordinary experiences. The moon landing unfolded not only as science, but as performance. Carefully staged broadcasts, global television audiences, dramatic speeches, heroic imagery. The astronauts themselves became mythic figures almost immediately. Modern society had never experienced anything quite like it. A technological event transformed into planetary theater. This does not mean Apollo was fake, but it does mean Apollo was consciously presented as symbolic drama. Every image mattered. Every phrase mattered. The mission carried psychological importance far beyond science alone. And perhaps this contributes to the strange dreamlike quality surrounding the moon landings even today. The footage itself appears unreal. Grainy transmissions from another world. Slow movements in unnatural gravity. Silent black skies behind brightly illuminated astronauts. The environment resembles science fiction more than ordinary history. And because the event feels cinematic, many people instinctively process it through the emotional logic of cinema, questioning the staging, questioning the imagery, questioning the narrative structure itself. Especially in an age where media manipulation has become increasingly visible. Today, digital effects can fabricate nearly anything convincingly. Modern audiences live within a constant stream of edited realities. And this environment reshapes how older events are perceived. Apollo, once accepted almost universally, now exists within a culture deeply suspicious of mediated truth. But perhaps the most fascinating aspect of Apollo is not whether the missions happened exactly as described. Perhaps the deeper mystery is why humanity needs the story so badly. Because Apollo represents something larger than engineering. It represents transcendence. a species leaving its home world for the first time, humanity proving that impossible things can become real. And emotionally, that idea matters enormously, especially in periods of fear and division. The moon landing became evidence that civilization could still achieve greatness, that science could inspire or instead of destruction, that the future might still belong to dreamers rather than wars. Perhaps that is why the debate surrounding Apollo continues endlessly, because beneath the technical arguments lies something much deeper, a struggle over belief itself, belief in institutions, belief in progress, belief in human capability, and belief that one summer night in 1969, fragile creatures from Earth truly crossed the darkness of space and stood upon another world beneath the silent light of the moon. Chapter 4: Shadows on the Lunar Surface. The moon is a strange place for the human imagination. Even before rockets and astronauts, it occupied a unique psychological space within human culture. Ancient civilizations treated it as divine. Poets described it as mysterious and unreachable. Religions connected it to cycles of life, madness, fertility, and death. For thousands of years, the moon existed not simply as an object in the sky, but as a symbol, a silent witness watching humanity from above. And perhaps this symbolic history explains why the Apollo photographs continue to generate such fascination. Because when humans finally arrived on the moon, or appeared to arrive there, the images felt unlike ordinary documentation. They felt surreal, dreamlike, almost staged. Black sky, silver dust, harsh light, long shadows stretching across lifeless terrain. Everything about the lunar environment appears visually unnatural to the human eye. And it is precisely within that unfamiliarity that many conspiracy theories began to grow. In the decades following Apollo, skeptics started analyzing mission photographs frame by frame, searching for inconsistencies, visual anomalies, details that appeared impossible or suspicious. The moon landing debate gradually transformed into a kind of modern forensic mythology, a global attempt to interpret images that millions of people only partially understood. One of the most famous questions involved the American flag. In Apollo footage, the flag appears to ripple or move. To skeptics, this seemed impossible. The moon has no atmosphere, no wind. So why would the flag move? For many viewers, the image immediately triggered suspicion. The explanation provided by engineers is relatively straightforward. The flag contained a horizontal support rod designed to keep the fabric extended. When astronauts twisted the pole into the lunar soil, the movement created vibrations that continued briefly because there was no atmosphere to slow them quickly. Without air resistance, motion behaves differently. The flag was not waving in wind. It was oscillating mechanically. Scientifically, this explanation is reasonable. Yet emotionally, the footage still feels strange. And conspiracy theories thrive precisely in that gap between scientific explanation and emotional perception. Another recurring question involves shadows. In many Apollo photographs, shadows appear angled differently from one another. Skeptics argue this suggests multiple artificial light sources, similar to a film studio. To them, the lighting appears inconsistent with a single sun illuminating the scene. Again, conventional explanations exist. Une veine terrain, wide-angle lenses, perspective distortion, highly reflective lunar dust. All can create unusual visual effects. Professional photographers and optical specialists have repeatedly demonstrated how these phenomena occur naturally. But Apollo skepticism rarely disappears through technical explanation alone, because the issue is not only scientific, It is psychological. The images feel unfamiliar. Human beings evolved within Earth's atmosphere under soft, diffused lighting conditions. The moon provides none of that. Its shadows become unnaturally sharp. Its contrast extreme. Its sky perfectly black even during daylight. The environment appears visually artificial precisely because it lacks the atmospheric conditions humans subconsciously expect. This creates a persistent sensation of unreality, almost like a stage set. And once that feeling enters perception, every detail begins attracting suspicion. Another famous mystery concerns the absence of stars in Apollo photographs. If astronauts stood in space beneath a black sky, why are stars invisible? To many people, this seems deeply suspicious. Surely the stars should appear brilliantly clear without Earth's atmosphere obscuring them. But camera exposure explains the issue relatively well. The lunar surface, illuminated directly by sunlight, was extremely bright. Astronauts and terrain required short exposure settings to avoid overexposure. Stars, comparatively dim, simply did not register on the film under those conditions. Photographers encounter similar effects on Earth constantly. A brightly lit foreground prevents faint background stars from appearing. Scientifically, the explanation is unremarkable. Emotionally, however, the empty black sky feels unsettling. The moon footage lacks familiar visual reference points. No clouds, no atmospheric haze, no visible stars, only darkness. Infinite darkness surrounding isolated human figures. And perhaps this contributes to the strange dreamlike quality of Apollo more than any technical issue. The astronauts do not appear fully connected to reality. They appear suspended between worlds. Tiny human beings moving slowly through absolute silence. The footage resembles memory more than documentary. There are also broader visual questions surrounding Apollo. Why does some footage appear smoother than expected? Why do movements sometimes resemble slow-motion recordings? Could lunar gravity alone fully explain astronaut motion? Physicists argue yes. Reduced gravity changes momentum, balance, and body mechanics significantly. Yet once again, emotional intuition often resists technical explanation. The movements appear unfamiliar enough to trigger doubt, especially among viewers already inclined towards suspicion. In many ways, Apollo became one of the first global events subjected to mass visual analysis. Millions of ordinary people suddenly had access to photographs and video evidence open to personal interpretation. Before television and photography, most historical events depended heavily on written accounts. Apollo changed that relationship completely. Now the public could examine the evidence directly, pause it, replay it, question it, and over time, this transformed the moon landing into something almost unprecedented. A technological event interpreted through collective visual obsession. The rise of the internet intensified this process dramatically. By the 1990s and early 2000s, Apollo conspiracy theory spread globally through websites, documentaries, and online forums. Images circulated endlessly with annotations pointing toward alleged anomalies. Shadows, crosshairs, reflections in astronaut visors, missing crater marks beneath the lunar module. Each detail became part of an expanding alternative narrative. Some theories remained relatively cautious, suggesting partial staging or media manipulation. Others became far more elaborate. Secret film studios, government cover-ups, hidden space programs, even claims that the moon itself contains structures or evidence intentionally concealed from the public. At this point, Apollo skepticism entered territory far beyond ordinary scientific debate. It became modern mythology, a symbolic struggle between institutional narratives and individual interpretation. And perhaps this transformation reveals something important about the modern human condition. People no longer merely consume information. They investigate it personally, question it, disassemble it, especially in societies where trust in authority has weakened. Every pixel becomes suspicious, every official explanation incomplete. And nowhere is this more visible than in the endless analysis of Apollo imagery. Yet despite decades of scrutiny, no universally accepted proof of fabrication has emerged. No definitive smoking gun. Instead, the debate persists in a strange suspended state. Believers remain convinced by overwhelming technical evidence. Skeptics remain convinced by emotional and visual inconsistencies. And between them exists an enormous grey area shaped by perception itself. Perhaps that is why the moon still feels mysterious even after humans claim to walk upon it. Because the Apollo images never fully demystified the moon. If anything, they deepened its strangeness. The photographs do not make the lunar surface feel familiar. They make it feel alien, silent, empty, almost outside human reality. And maybe that emotional discomfort explains why Apollo continues haunting modern imagination. Not simply because of politics or conspiracy theories, but because the images themselves feel like fragments from a dream humanity still struggles to fully understand. A dream captured in black sky and silver dust beneath the endless silence of another world. Chapter 5. The conspiracy begins. For several years after the Apollo missions, public doubt remained relatively small. Most people accepted the moon landings as genuine. The astronauts were celebrated as heroes. Schools taught Apollo as humanity's greatest technological triumph. And television repeatedly replayed the famous images of astronauts walking across the lunar surface. But beneath the surface of public consensus, skepticism slowly began forming. At first, it existed only in isolated conversations, quiet doubts, technical questions, personal suspicions. Then, during the 1970s, something changed. Trust itself began collapsing across the Western world. And once trust weakens, conspiracy theories find fertile ground. The Vietnam War revealed that governments could manipulate public information on a massive scale. Official statements often contradicted reality. Casualty numbers became political tools. Television exposed disturbing scenes that clashed sharply with reassuring government narratives. Then came Watergate scandal. For many Americans, Watergate permanently altered the relationship between citizens and authority. The idea that powerful institutions might deliberately deceive the public was no longer paranoid speculation. It had become historical fact. Within this atmosphere of distrust, Apollo began appearing differently. Questions that once sounded absurd suddenly felt possible. If governments could lie about war, why not about space? This psychological shift mattered enormously, because conspiracy theories rarely emerge from evidence alone. They emerge from emotional climate. And the emotional climate of the 1970s was saturated with suspicion. Into that environment entered one of the most influential figures in Apollo skepticism, Bill Kaysing. In 1976, Kaysing published a book titled We Never Went to the Moon, America's $30 billion swindle. The book would become foundational for nearly every major moon landing conspiracy theory that followed. Kaysing was not a physicist, not an astronaut, not a high-ranking NASA engineer, but he understood something psychologically important. people are drawn toward narratives that transform confusion into hidden meaning. His arguments focused less on proving an alternative reality and more on amplifying doubt. Technical inconsistencies, photographic anomalies, alleged impossibilities. Questions presented in ways that felt emotionally persuasive even when scientifically disputed. The book arrived at precisely the right historical moment. Public trust was fragile. The space race had ended. Economic instability and political scandal dominated headlines. And Apollo itself already possessed an almost cinematic quality. The mission seemed so extraordinary that many people found them difficult to emotionally process as ordinary historical events. Kaysing's theories gave structure to that uncertainty. Soon afterward, the conspiracy began expanding far beyond a single book. Late-night radio programs discussed hidden government operations. Television documentaries questioned official narratives. Alternative researchers analyzed Apollo footage frame by frame. And gradually, the moon landing transformed from accepted history into one of the most debated events of the 20th century. What made the conspiracy especially powerful was its flexibility. Every official explanation could itself be interpreted as part of the cover-up. Every contradiction became evidence of deception. Every missing detail reinforced suspicion. This is one reason conspiracy theories are often difficult to eliminate completely. They create closed interpretive systems. Within those systems, uncertainty itself becomes proof. And Apollo contained enough complexity to generate endless uncertainty. Thousands of technical details, massive amounts of footage, complicated engineering concepts unfamiliar to ordinary audiences. Most people lack the expertise necessary to independently verify the claims being discussed. As a result, emotional intuition often became more influential than technical analysis. And emotionally, some aspects of Apollo genuinely felt strange. The footage looked unreal. The political pressure surrounding the missions had been immense. The technology seemed improbably advanced for its time. And perhaps most importantly, the moon itself remained psychologically distant from everyday experience. Almost no one could truly imagine what standing on another world would feel like. This made Apollo uniquely vulnerable to reinterpretation. Unlike ordinary historical events, lunar exploration existed beyond direct human familiarity. The public depended entirely on mediated evidence. Photographs, television broadcasts, government documentation. And in modern societies, mediated realities always contain vulnerability. Because people instinctively understand that images can be manipulated, narratives can be controlled, spectacle can be manufactured. The rise of cinema during the 20th century intensified this suspicion further. By the late 1960s, film technology had already become capable of astonishing visual illusions. Science fiction films depicted space travel convincingly enough to blur emotional boundaries between reality and fiction. Some conspiracy theorists later pointed towards Stanley Kubrick, arguing that advanced cinematic techniques may have been used to stage lunar footage. These claims became especially popular because of Kubrick's film 2001, A Space Odyssey. Released only 1 year before Apollo 11, the movie presented space travel with visual realism unprecedented for its time. To many viewers, the coincidence felt suspicious. A director capable of creating realistic space imagery suddenly appearing just before the moon landing. Of course, no credible evidence has ever proven Kubrick participated in fabricating Apollo footage. And many experts argue the technological limitations of 1960s filmmaking would actually have made a convincing fake extremely difficult. Yet the theory survived because it appealed emotionally. It transformed Apollo into something archetypal, a hidden production, a secret performance staged for the entire planet. And perhaps this idea resonates because modern civilization increasingly resembles theater itself. Politics, media, advertising, public relations. Everywhere, reality appears carefully managed and presented. Apollo arrived precisely at the moment when television became central to global consciousness. For the first time, humanity experienced a historical event simultaneously through screens. This altered perception permanently. The moon landing was not witnessed directly by most people. It was broadcast, narrated, framed through cameras and institutional storytelling. And that distinction matters psychologically. Because once reality becomes mediated, suspicion enters naturally. What lies outside the frame? What remains unseen? Who controls the narrative? These questions became central not only to Apollo skepticism, but to modern culture as a whole. By the late 20th century, moon landing conspiracies had evolved into something far larger than technical debate. They became symbolic, a way of expressing distrust toward authority, media, and institutional power. Believing Apollo was staged no longer depended entirely upon understanding rockets or photography. It became connected to identity, to worldview, to the feeling that modern society itself operates through manipulation and illusion. And perhaps this explains why the conspiracy persists despite decades of scientific rebuttal. Because the debate is no longer only about the moon. It is about truth itself. Who defines it? Who controls it? And whether ordinary people can still recognize it within a world increasingly shaped by spectacle. The irony is striking. Apollo was originally intended to unite humanity through wonder. Instead, over time, it became one of the most powerful symbols of modern distrust. A triumph transformed into suspicion. A dream transformed into interrogation. And somewhere beneath all the arguments, diagrams, photographs, and documentaries remains the deeper question that continues haunting the modern imagination. Did humanity truly walk upon the moon? Or did the modern world become so skilled at constructing images that reality itself began to feel uncertain? Chapter 6. The Van Allen Belt. Among all the technical arguments surrounding Apollo, few subjects appear as frequently, or as ominously, as the Van Allen radiation belts. To many conspiracy theorists, the belts represent the single greatest obstacle to the moon landings. An invisible barrier surrounding Earth. A deadly region of trapped radiation through which astronauts supposedly traveled. Again and again, skeptics ask the same question. How could human beings survive passing through such an environment using 1960s technology? At first glance, the concern feels reasonable. Radiation is deeply frightening to the human mind precisely because it is invisible. You cannot see it. You cannot feel it immediately. And yet it can alter living tissue at the cellular level. The atomic age permanently transformed humanity's perception of radiation into something associated with catastrophe. Nuclear explosions, cancer, genetic damage, invisible death carried through the atmosphere. By the time Apollo launched, public anxiety surrounding radiation already existed at profound psychological levels. Then came the discovery of the Van Allen belts themselves. In 1958, scientist James Van Allen identified enormous regions of charged particles trapped by Earth's magnetic field. These radiation zones surrounded the planet like invisible layers extending through space. The discovery was scientifically fascinating. But later, it would become central to moon landing skepticism. To understand the controversy, it helps to understand what the belts actually are. Earth's magnetic field captures energetic particles originating largely from the Sun. These particles accumulate in regions now known as the Van Allen belts. Radiation levels within them vary dramatically depending on altitude, solar activity, and trajectory. Some portions are relatively mild, others significantly more dangerous. To skeptics, this created an apparent contradiction. If the belts contain harmful radiation, how could Apollo astronauts pass through them safely without severe injury or death? The spacecraft shielding appears thin by modern expectations. The mission durations were long, and according to some critics, the technology simply could not have protected human beings adequately. This argument became especially popular because radiation feels scientifically authoritative. Many people lack detailed knowledge of space physics. As a result, the topic can appear intimidating and difficult to independently evaluate. The phrase radiation belts alone evokes danger. Invisible cosmic barriers surrounding Earth. Emotionally, the concept sounds almost fatal. NASA's explanation, however, is more nuanced. The Apollo trajectories were carefully planned to minimize exposure. Astronauts did not travel directly through the most intense regions for extended periods. Mission timing mattered. Flight paths mattered. Duration mattered. Radiation exposure in space is not simply a binary question of safe or deadly. It depends on dosage. According to official calculations, Apollo astronauts received radiation doses considered survivable and comparable to certain medical exposures accumulated over time. Not harmless, but not lethal. In later years, surviving astronauts showed no clear evidence of acute radiation sickness associated with catastrophic exposure during the missions. For supporters of Apollo, this strongly supports the official narrative. For skeptics, however, uncertainties remain, especially because radiation effects can be probabilistic rather than immediate. Conspiracy theorists often point toward modern caution surrounding deep space travel. If radiation remains such a major concern today, they ask, how could astronauts safely cross the belts decades ago? This question becomes emotionally persuasive because modern space agencies openly acknowledge the dangers of prolonged radiation exposure beyond Earth's protective magnetic field. Plans for future missions to Mars involve serious concerns about cosmic radiation. Shielding remains a difficult engineering problem even today, and this creates apparent contradiction in the public imagination. Modern caution seems incompatible with Apollo's success, but the comparison is not entirely straightforward. Mars missions would involve vastly longer durations in deep space, months rather than days. Apollo astronauts crossed the belts relatively quickly and spent limited time beyond Earth's magnetosphere compared to proposed interplanetary missions. Still, the emotional power of the radiation argument remains strong, because invisible threats always amplify human fear. Unlike mechanical failure, radiation cannot be directly observed by ordinary people. It becomes abstract, mysterious, almost mythological, and myths flourish within invisibility. There is also another psychological factor at work. Modern audiences often underestimate historical engineering capability while simultaneously overestimating technological linearity. People assume technological progress moves steadily upward, more advanced today than yesterday. Yet history is rarely that simple. Apollo occurred during an unusual moment of concentrated national focus and funding. Enormous resources were directed towards solving a single problem. After the Moon program ended, many specialized systems were abandoned because political priorities shifted. This contributes to modern confusion. People look backward and wonder, if humanity reached the Moon in 1969, why does deep space travel still appear so difficult? Why did progress seem to slow? The answer is partly economic and political rather than purely technological. But emotionally, the discontinuity feels suspicious. The Van Allen debate reflects this broader psychological tension. Apollo exists between two conflicting intuitions. One intuition says human beings are capable of extraordinary achievements under pressure. The other says the missions seem improbably advanced for their era. And both intuitions contain elements of truth. There is also something symbolically fascinating about the idea of radiation belts themselves. Invisible layers surrounding Earth. Protective boundaries separating humanity from deep space. In mythology, ancient worlds often described dangerous thresholds between realms, barriers between ordinary reality and unknown territory. The Van Allen belts almost resemble a scientific version of that archetype. Modern civilization standing at the edge of a cosmic boundary, preparing to cross into environments never meant for human life. Perhaps this symbolic quality contributes unconsciously to the subject's enduring fascination. The belts transform space travel into something more than engineering. They make it feel forbidden, dangerous, nearly supernatural. And Apollo becomes not merely exploration, but transgression. Human beings leaving the protected world for the first time, crossing invisible barriers into cosmic darkness. This emotional narrative helps explain why the radiation debate remains so persistent despite technical rebuttals. Because beneath the scientific arguments lies a deeper psychological question. Was humanity truly prepared to leave Earth? Or did the moon landings represent a leap so enormous that even now, decades later, the human imagination still struggles to fully accept it? Perhaps that is why the Van Allen belts continue haunting discussions about Apollo. Not simply as radiation zones, but as symbols. The final invisible boundary between the familiar world and the silent unknown waiting beyond it. Chapter 7. The Missing Tapes. Sometimes, in great historical mysteries, the smallest details become the most unsettling. Not explosions, not dramatic revelations, but absences. Things that should exist, yet somehow do not. In the case of Apollo, few absences have generated more suspicion than the missing telemetry data and original moon landing tapes. To skeptics, this issue feels almost impossible to ignore. How could one of the most important events in human history lose critical original recordings? How could humanity's first steps on another world not be preserved with absolute perfection? The story surrounding the tapes has become one of the most emotionally powerful aspects of the entire Apollo controversy, because it transforms doubt into something tangible, something physical. Missing evidence. The most famous example involves the original slow-scan television recordings from Apollo 11 moon landing. The footage viewed by the public in 1969 was not a direct recording from the moon in the form audiences later imagined. The original lunar transmission used a specialized slow-scan television format designed for space communication bandwidth limitations. On Earth, the signal had to be converted into standard broadcast television before being transmitted worldwide. During that conversion process, image quality degraded significantly. The grainy footage humanity remembers today is essentially a recording of a screen displaying the original signal. For decades, many assumed the pristine original recordings still existed somewhere within NASA archives. But in the early 2000s, NASA acknowledged that the original Apollo 11 slow-scan tapes were missing, most likely erased and reused during later data management operations. The announcement shocked many people. Even individuals with no interest in conspiracy theories found the situation difficult to comprehend emotionally. How could recordings of humanity's first moon landing simply disappear? The explanation, according to NASA, reflects the bureaucratic realities of the era rather than sinister intent. During the 1960s and 1970s, magnetic tape storage was expensive and routinely reused. Archival practices differed dramatically from modern digital preservation standards. At the time, few anticipated how culturally significant the original recordings would become decades later. Engineers prioritized practical resource management over historical sentiment. Scientifically and historically, this explanation is plausible. Emotionally, however, it feels almost unbearable. People expect civilization to preserve sacred moments, and the moon landing had become sacred in modern historical consciousness. The idea that original tapes might be casually erased creates a profound sense of dissonance, especially because Apollo itself already occupies an unstable territory between history and mythology. The missing tapes intensified that instability enormously. To conspiracy theorists, the situation appeared deeply suspicious. Missing recordings, incomplete telemetry data, lost technical documentation, all became interpreted not as bureaucratic failure, but as deliberate concealment. And once again, distrust magnified uncertainty. Some skeptics argued the tapes were destroyed intentionally to hide evidence of staging. Others proposed that the publicly released footage differed from original recordings in important ways. More extreme theories claimed NASA concealed anomalies observed on the lunar surface itself, unknown objects, unexpected structures, evidence of extraterrestrial activity. Over time, the missing tapes evolved into a symbolic vacuum into which countless theories could expand. This is one reason absences are psychologically powerful. The human mind naturally fills empty spaces with narrative, especially when the missing material carries emotional significance. A missing ordinary recording might attract little attention, but missing recordings from the moon feel different, almost uncanny. The controversy extends beyond videotapes alone. Large portions of original Apollo-era telemetry data and engineering records also became fragmented, degraded, or difficult to access over time. Again, historians note that such losses are not especially unusual in large technological programs spanning decades. Documents become misplaced. Storage media deteriorates. Organizations reorganize archives repeatedly. Countless historical records from the 20th century have been lost through ordinary negligence. Yet Apollo does not feel ordinary. And because it does not feel ordinary, ordinary explanations often fail emotionally. The stakes seem too high, the event too important. People instinctively expect perfection surrounding something as monumental as the first moon landing. Any inconsistency begins feeling suspicious, especially within cultures already shaped by institutional distrust. The internet amplified this effect dramatically. Online communities collected fragmented archival anomalies into unified alternative narratives. Missing tapes became evidence. Contradictory statements became proof. Every gap in the historical record strengthened suspicion further. And emotionally, the argument possesses undeniable power. After all, if humanity truly accomplished one of the greatest achievements in history, why does the evidence sometimes feel strangely fragile? Why do key recordings vanish? Why do certain technical details remain incomplete? Why does Apollo often feel less documented than modern audiences expect? Part of the answer lies in technological transition. Apollo existed at the boundary between analog and digital civilization. Much of its information storage depended on physical media vulnerable to degradation and reuse. Modern audiences, accustomed accustomed to infinite digital duplication, struggled to emotionally relate to a world where priceless recordings could disappear through bureaucratic oversight. But another part of the answer may involve something deeper. Modern society increasingly expects history to function like permanent memory, perfectly archived, perfectly retrievable. Apollo reminds us that real history is often messy, fragmented, incomplete. Even enormous events leave behind gaps and uncertainties. And perhaps this incompleteness itself contributes to Apollo's continuing mystery. Because mystery survives within absence. If every detail remained perfectly preserved, perhaps conspiracy theories would lose some of their emotional power. But the missing tapes create shadows within the narrative. Places where certainty weakens. Places where imagination begins operating freely. There is also something strangely symbolic about the lost recordings. Humanity reaches another world for the first time, and the original images vanish, almost like a dream partially forgotten after waking. The moon landing itself sometimes feels this way. Too extraordinary, too distant, too surreal to fully grasp as ordinary reality. The missing tapes deepen that sensation. Apollo becomes not only a historical event, but a fading memory, a fragmented transmission from another age. And perhaps that is why the debate surrounding the tapes continues. Not merely because people suspect deception, but because the losses themselves feel emotionally impossible to accept. The first footsteps on another world should have remained immortal, untouchable, perfectly preserved. Instead, parts of the record dissolved quietly into history, and in the silence left behind, suspicion began to grow, like static drifting through an old transmission from the moon, a signal crossing enormous darkness, still trying to reach us clearly after all these years. Chapter 8. The Moon as Myth. Perhaps the most fascinating question surrounding Apollo is not whether the missions happened. Perhaps the deeper question is why the moon landing no longer feels entirely real. Objectively, humanity has achieved astonishing technological feats throughout history. Nuclear energy, global communication networks, artificial satellites, genetic engineering, the internet. Modern civilization already operates through technologies that would have appeared miraculous only a century ago. And yet the moon landing occupies a different psychological category altogether. It feels less like history, and more like mythology. Even people who fully accept Apollo as genuine often describe the missions in dreamlike terms. Surreal, unbelievable, almost impossible to emotionally process. The footage itself contributes strongly to this sensation. Black sky, ghostly silence, astronauts moving slowly across pale dust beneath a motionless horizon. Everything appears detached from ordinary human experience. Unlike wars, elections, disasters, or revolutions, the moon landing possesses no familiar emotional framework. Almost nobody can intuitively imagine what standing on another world truly feels like. And because the human mind depends heavily on familiarity to establish reality, Apollo remains psychologically unstable. The event feels simultaneously documented and unreal. This tension may explain why conspiracy theories surrounding Apollo became so culturally powerful. The moon landing arrived during a moment when media itself was transforming human consciousness. For the first time in history, hundreds of millions of people experienced a monumental event simultaneously through television. Reality became broadcast, curated, mediated through cameras and institutional narration. Most people did not see the moon directly. They saw a representation of the moon, an electronic image transmitted across enormous distances. This distinction matters profoundly, because modern societies increasingly experience reality indirectly, through screens, through edited narratives, through carefully framed imagery. Apollo became one of the earliest examples of global mediated reality. And perhaps, unconsciously, people sensed this transformation immediately. The moon landing was not simply an event. It was a spectacle, not necessarily fake, but constructed, presented, cinematically organized for planetary audiences. The astronauts became archetypal heroes almost overnight. The mission possessed dramatic structure, danger, triumph, iconic dialogue, visually unforgettable imagery. In many ways, Apollo resembled mythology more than ordinary history from the very beginning. And mythology naturally attracts reinterpretation. Across human civilizations, myths often emerge around moments that feel too large for ordinary explanation. Great floods, lost civilizations, divine revelations, world-changing journeys. These stories survive not because every detail can be historically verified, but because they satisfy emotional and symbolic needs. Apollo functions similarly within modern civilization. It represents transcendence. Humanity escaping Earth for the first time, crossing into the heavens once reserved only for gods and imagination. The moon itself already carried enormous symbolic weight long before spaceflight existed. Ancient cultures connected it to cycles of life and death, madness, dreams, the subconscious, transformation. The moon governed tides and illuminated darkness. It appeared distant yet constantly present, familiar yet unreachable. For thousands of years, it remained humanity's closest cosmic mystery. Then suddenly, within a few years, human beings claimed to walk upon it. Psychologically, this transition happened almost too quickly. The moon shifted from mythological object to physical destination in less than a decade. And perhaps the human imagination never fully adapted to that change. Even now, the Apollo mission seems strangely disconnected from ordinary history. People discuss ancient Rome, World War II, or the Industrial Revolution with relative emotional stability. But discussions about the moon often become polarized almost immediately. Wonder collides with suspicion. Scientific explanation collides with emotional disbelief. Because Apollo exists at the border between two human realities, the rational and the symbolic. Rationally, the missions are supported by extensive evidence, engineering documentation, independent tracking data, lunar samples, thousands of participants, scientific consistency. Yet symbolically, the missions feel almost supernatural. Human beings crossing the void of space using fragile machines and returning safely from another world. The event resembles mythic storytelling structures repeated across civilizations for thousands of years. The hero leaves the ordinary world, crosses into the unknown, faces mortal danger, returns transformed. Apollo follows this archetype almost perfectly. And perhaps that is why debates surrounding the missions continue endlessly. Because myths are never purely factual discussions. They become reflections of cultural psychology. To believe in Apollo often represents belief in progress, science, and institutional capability. To reject Apollo often represents distrust toward authority, media, and centralized power. The moon landing became a symbolic battlefield for modern consciousness itself. There is also another reason Apollo increasingly feels unreal in the 21st century. Modern civilization has not continued the trajectory people expected after 1969. The moon landing seemed to promise a cosmic future. permanent lunar bases, human missions to Mars, space stations across the solar system. Many believed humanity would expand rapidly beyond Earth. Instead, the future unfolded differently. Computers became smaller rather than rockets becoming larger. Digital networks transformed daily life more dramatically than deep space exploration. Humanity entered virtual worlds instead of colonizing physical ones. And because the expected future never fully arrived, Apollo now feels isolated in time, almost anomalous. A brief moment when civilization touched something extraordinary before retreating back toward Earth. This isolation intensifies the mythological atmosphere surrounding the missions. Apollo appears less like the beginning of an era and more like a vanished golden age. A moment modern civilization still struggles to explain emotionally. Some conspiracy theories may even emerge partly from disappointment. The moon landing promised transcendence, but ordinary life remained ordinary afterward. Wars continued. Political corruption continued. Human conflict continued. The stars did not suddenly become accessible. And perhaps some people unconsciously resolved this disappointment by questioning the event itself. If the future never truly arrived, maybe the dream was never real. Yet regardless of individual belief, Apollo undeniably transformed human consciousness. For the first time, humanity saw itself from outside Earth, a fragile species standing briefly upon another celestial body. That image changed civilization permanently. And perhaps that is why the moon still feels haunted. Not haunted by aliens or hidden structures, but haunted by possibility, by the memory of a moment when humanity seemed capable of transcending its limits completely. The moon became more than a destination. It became a mirror, reflecting human ambition, human doubt, human loneliness, and humanity's endless struggle to separate truth from myth within an age increasingly shaped by images. Even now, beneath every debate about Apollo, one deeper question continues echoing quietly through modern culture. What happens when human achievement becomes so extraordinary that it begins to resemble legend? Chapter 9. Beyond the silence of the moon. Far above the Earth, beyond clouds, beyond weather, beyond the noise of civilization, the moon continues its silent journey around our planet, unchanged, watching, ancient long before humanity existed, ancient long before rockets, nations, or television broadcasts. And perhaps that is why the moon still unsettles the human imagination. Because unlike Earth, the moon feels untouched by ordinary time, a frozen world suspended in silence, a place where history itself seems unable to fully reach. Even after Apollo, the moon never became ordinary. Human beings walked upon its surface, left footprints in its dust, placed flags and scientific instruments beneath its black sky. And yet somehow, emotionally, the moon remained mysterious, perhaps more mysterious than before. That is the strange paradox of Apollo. The missions answered one of humanity's oldest questions. Could humans reach another world? The answer appeared to be yes. And yet the achievement created new uncertainties almost immediately. Why did we stop going? Why does the footage still feel unreal? Why do debates continue more than half a century later? Part of the answer lies in the nature of the moon itself. The lunar environment resists emotional familiarity. No air, no sound, no movement except slow drifting dust and distant sunlight. Human beings evolved within forests, oceans, storms, and living ecosystems. The moon offers none of these things. It is a world of stillness. and extreme stillness often feels unnatural to the human mind. Apollo footage carries that stillness inside it. The astronauts move like isolated figures inside a dream. The black sky behind them appears endless. There are no birds, no wind, no visible life, only silence, absolute silence. Even the astronauts themselves sometimes describe the experience in strangely emotional terms after returning to Earth. Not merely exciting, but overwhelming, transformative. Some spoke about seeing Earth from space and realizing how fragile humanity truly is. A small blue world floating alone in darkness. Borders invisible. Conflicts meaningless from such distance. The overview effect, as it later became known, altered many astronauts psychologically. And perhaps this is another reason Apollo became larger than ordinary history. The missions were not simply technological. They were existential. Human beings left their world for the first time and looked back upon it from the outside. No civilization had ever experienced that perspective before. For a brief moment, humanity became aware of itself as a planetary species. Yet despite this extraordinary achievement, something unexpected happened afterward. The momentum faded. The moon landings ended. Public fascination slowly diminished. Political priorities changed. And gradually, Apollo began receding into memory. This retreat created a strange emotional vacuum. The future promised by the space race never fully arrived. There were no vast lunar cities, no permanent colonies beneath domes of glass, no regular voyages between worlds. The stars remained distant, and because the dream remained unfinished, Apollo acquired an almost mythological atmosphere. A brief golden age, a moment civilization touched the impossible before turning away again. Perhaps this incompleteness contributes to modern suspicion. People instinctively expect genuine historical transformations to continue expanding. But Apollo appeared almost suddenly, and then disappeared almost as suddenly. To some, this feels emotionally inconsistent. If humanity truly reached the moon, why did we stop? The practical explanations involve economics, politics, and shifting priorities. But emotionally, the silence that followed Apollo feels strange. Too quiet, as though humanity opened a door into the cosmos, then slowly backed away from it. Conspiracy theories thrive within such silence, because silence invites interpretation. And the moon itself is perhaps the greatest symbol of silence humanity has ever encountered. Even today, discussions about Apollo rarely remain purely technical. The debate quickly becomes philosophical. Questions about trust, reality, media, power, and the nature of belief itself. Because Apollo occurred at the exact moment modern civilization entered the age of mediated reality. Television transformed history into spectacle. Global audiences experienced events indirectly through screens and narration. And once humanity began living inside images, certainty became more fragile. Apollo exists at the beginning of that transformation. A historical event simultaneously real and cinematic, documented and dreamlike, scientific and mythological. Perhaps that is why no final answer fully satisfies everyone. For believers, Apollo represents humanity at its greatest. Proof that intelligence, courage, and cooperation can achieve seemingly impossible things. For skeptics, Apollo represents the danger of accepting institutional narratives too easily. A warning about spectacle, propaganda, and manipulated perception. And somewhere between these positions lies an uncomfortable truth. Modern civilization depends upon systems most individuals cannot personally verify. Almost nobody fully understands every technology shaping daily life. People trust experts, institutions, networks of information. Apollo magnified this reality dramatically. The moon landing required ordinary citizens to believe in something almost impossible to witness or comprehend directly. And belief, once separated from direct experience, always contains vulnerability. Perhaps that vulnerability explains why Apollo continues haunting the modern imagination. Not because the evidence is weak, but because the event itself feels too enormous for ordinary psychological stability. The moon landing resembles the kind of achievement civilizations usually place in mythology. And yet it happened during the modern age of cameras, broadcasts, and engineering diagrams. A myth recorded on videotape. Even now, decades later, humanity still has not emotionally caught up with what Apollo represented. A species born on one world briefly touching another. Tiny human beings crossing cosmic darkness inside fragile machines. Returning home carrying dust from the surface of the moon. It sounds less like history, and more like ancient legend retold through television static. Perhaps the final truth about Apollo is not contained entirely within photographs, tapes, or technical documents. Perhaps the deeper truth lies in what the missions revealed about humanity itself. Our hunger for transcendence, our fear of deception, our longing to believe in greatness, and our inability to fully separate reality from symbolism once events become large enough. Tonight, the moon still hangs above the Earth exactly as it did before Apollo. Silent, distant, watching oceans, cities, wars, and dreams pass beneath its pale light. Somewhere upon its surface remain the footprints left decades ago, untouched by wind, untouched by rain, preserved in stillness. And perhaps that image alone explains why the story continues haunting us. Footprints on another world, resting forever in silence beyond the Earth. Proof of humanity's greatest journey. Or perhaps the most beautiful illusion modern civilization ever created. The moon does not answer. It only watches, quietly waiting above the sleeping world.